Tonight we are live from Rotterdam, Barcelona, Oxford and London. Welcome to StockBox Premiere. Joining us on the panel tonight, our guests are Clarissa Shoenmimo-Coker and Dr. Valentino Paravicini from Oxford Cannabinoid Technologies, that's the ticker OCTP, where we're going to be talking about Programme 1, which is targeting neuropathic and visceral pain. Jeremy Skillington, the CEO of Poolbeg Pharma, that's the hashtag or the ticker POLB, talking about their POLB 001 treatment for severe influenza. And Neil Clark, the CEO of Destiny Pharma, that's the ticker DEST, DEST, looking at their Advanced Infection Prevention Clinical Programme. So as usual, we'll begin with the 10 to 15 minute project specific interview, followed by the open Q&A session for 15 minutes. This is of course your chance to put your questions to the director speaking using the live chat. Please do join in the conversation by using the YouTube live chat or hashtag StockBoxPremiere over on Twitter. And perhaps if you're feeling generous, hit that like button, or to really warm the cockles of our heart, give us a subscribe on YouTube or a follow on Twitter. The directors are of course bound by market rules, but they will do their very best to answer your questions as best they can. So, to kick us off tonight, let's welcome our first guests, Clarissa Shoenmimo-Coker and Dr. Valentino Paravicini from Oxford Cannabinoid Technologies. Good evening to you both and welcome onto StockBox Premiere. How are you both doing?
Very well, thanks Mark. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Very well here as well.
Excellent. No, it's great to welcome you onto this pharmaceutical special on StockBox Premiere tonight. So, we're going to talk about Programme 1, which is your in-licensed compound targeting neuropathic and visceral pain, and it will be entering phase 1 clinical trials in Q1 23. So perhaps just for new and also existing investors, but just to start us off, Clarissa or Valentino, could you give us a high-level overview of Programme 1 and what the target market is?
Sure. Valentino, I'm going to hand that one to you, I think.
Of course. Thank you very much, Clarissa. So thank you very much for this and welcome to everybody on the line. Before I go into the depth of Programme 1, I guess I will give you a brief overview of what we try to achieve at OCTP. We are a pharmaceutical company and we develop not just one, but a pipeline of novel cannabinoid prescription medicine. These are targeting an important biological system in our body that is known as the endocannabinoid system. That is the one that is targeted basically by the cannabinoids contained, for example, in cannabis. The system is important to regulate sort of activities of our body, functionality of our body, for example, to maintain the balance between the physical and mental health. And if this balance is broken, you have a disease, you have a condition, you have pain. And our aim is to restore this balance with a cannabinoid-based treatment. And these treatments are rigorously tested and approved by the regulator, for example, the FDA or the MHRA in the UK. So that eventually can be prescribed by the physician and also be reimbursed by insurers in the public health system where it's applicable. We as a company, we decided to focus on pain, particularly the debilitating pain, the one that you cannot be targeted with, for example, over the counter like paracetamol or ibuprofen. And we use 3 types of cannabinoids. One is unmodified phytocannabinoids, like the one you find in the plant. One is actually derivatives of these phytocannabinoids that we modified so that they behave better as a drug. And finally, we have purely synthetic molecule that mimics the cannabinoids. And OCT 1201, that is part of the program 1, is actually such a molecule. It doesn't look like a cannabinoid, but it behaves like one. So it binds a receptor, particular receptor is called CB2. And in doing so, is activating the endocannabinoid system. The idea is that we use the same receptor effectively. It's targeted by the natural cannabis extract, the compound in the cannabis, but we modify the structure so that it's effectively binding only one receptor, so not many. That will give a better sort of efficacy indication. The second one that is always done the same way to every patient, so as much as we can, of course. And the third one is that it does not cause psychotropic effect because it does not bind to the CB1. So as Mark said, we are aiming to enter phase 1 clinical trial in the next few months, in first quarter 2023. And we always said at OCT that we let science to show our way. And based on the data that we generated through our collaborators, we decided to particularly target 2 indications. One is chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, and the other one, as Mark would say, it's visceral pain. It's irritable bowel syndrome. However, as we always said, OCT will be looking at an indication expansion in other neuropathic pain pathologies. Just to give a brief overview, CIPN, chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuralgia, is caused basically by the damage that the chemotherapeutic agent causes to the nerve. The people that take chemotherapy, a good percentage of them, 30, 40, in some cases even 60%, depending on which drug they use, basically have damage in their nerve. They start developing pain, discomforts, hypersensitivity, and the damage can be either acute, so only when they take the drug, the chemotherapeutic drug, or long-lived, so it stays even after that. In either case, it's a very debilitating condition. It has a very sort of bad impact on the condition of life of this individual. And unfortunately, in some cases, even when it's treated by current medication, none of which, by the way, is approved for this particular condition, but is used nonetheless, even if they treat, as I said, they will have to stop chemotherapeutic therapy, and therefore that is a very bad thing. Obviously, we want to stop that from happening. IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome, instead, is a different type of pain. It's visceral pain, and it's basically abdominal pain associated with a change or altered status of the bowel habits. Also associated with a very well reduced quality of life. For example, affect interaction with friends and family, with society, and impact also productivity at work. And in general, as I said, is really debilitating, even psychologically, I would say. And there are different types of IBS. Some have predominantly diarrhea, some predominantly constipation, but either way, the effect on the life of people, as I say, is very severe. So when after, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, that explains it very well. So really, it's pain targeting that
Yes.
market, and you've mentioned that IBS and of course chemotherapy, the cancer. Are you just limiting to that, or can this be applied to other elements of pain that people would suffer in the course of their life?
Yes, I mean, as I said, the obviously when you're looking for sort of approaching in therapy in pain, you want to aim to a specific indication, and that's what the regulators suggest and what science normally says. You follow the data that you generated, you go for that particular indication. Once you prove success, of course, first you have to prove that the compound is or the treatment is safe, and that's why you go on a phase 1 clinical trial. But once you prove that it's safe and efficacious in some disease, then you can start to look at what people, I guess, in the industry call it indication expansion, meaning you start looking at a type of disorder. And again, you do the appropriate studies and you check whether the compound may be useful. For example, CIPN is caused by damage to a specific type of nerve, they call small fiber nerves. And there's another disease that is caused by damage to this particular nerves, that is diabetes neuropathy, or DNP. So that could be, for example, an indication, and we obviously plan to study in that direction as well. Of course, first we need to prove, again, as I say, safety, lack of toxicity, and efficacy in the main indication that we want to target.
Indeed. Well, talking about proving that up then, you are going for phase 1 clinical trials in the early part of next year, so fairly imminent. Are you on track to get to that point? Could you give investors perhaps a snapshot of the work that's leading up to starting there and how it's looking like?
Sure, yes. Well, it's looking very good. When after the IPO, we enter a platform called Indigo. What it does is basically takes all the coordinates, all the interdisciplinary aspects of the drug discovery, and it put it all together in a very coordinated fashion that allow us to increase the speed, but also optimize chances to success. What the program does, effectively, it enables every aspect of drug discovery. On one side, we can manufacture the compound in small amounts, then in in larger amounts of a kilogram, 4 kilogram size, for example. That is basically showing you that can be used, be produced when you want to enter actually in therapy. Post launch, so to speak, so we can, we basically produce or manufacture the product, but also we start a formulation, so we know how to produce it as a drug substance, as a drug product. So actually, the way it will go to the patient, or first of all, of course, into the clinical trial unit. And of course, underlying all of this, there is a big element of safety. So we need to understand how the compounds behave when it's put in the body, how the body reacts to it. And we do that through a series of experiments, in vitro first and in vivo as well. And I'm happy to say that all the experiments, even after a long treatment with doses of compound, they are much higher than the one we expected in human to have efficacy. It's well tolerated. In addition to that, all this data that we produce in vitro, in vivo, for the manufacturing, for the formulation, they are all put together in a way that is sort of regulatory friendly, so that it facilitates basically submission to the agency. So we are basically finishing this step. I can say that we have data that coming out that, again, as I say, is well tolerated. We can produce in large amounts in a very consistent fashion. We can produce actually the drug as will be used in the clinical units, and therefore we are perfectly on track to meet our timelines for the first Q 2023. Of course,
excellent,
that it will be preceded by the application to the regulatory agency.
Okay. We're just looking perhaps a little bit further ahead then. It might be difficult, I appreciate, to talk about that, but just if we can, assuming that the treatment is licensed, what is the production and licensing structure likely to be? And can you give any kind of rough timescale when potentially the treatment could come to market?
Clarissa, do you want to go into this one?
Sure. I'm happy to pick that up. So yeah, I mean, it's as we've just said, we're about to go into phase 1 in January. So we all know that drug development, drug discovery is a reasonably long process, although we have managed to shorten that time frame by using that Indigo program that Valentino was just talking about. So we're looking at coming to market, I think, probably circa 2027, all being well, or back end of that year. So in terms of how it kind of rolls out, so obviously we're targeting those 2 indications that Valentino's mentioned. Again, as we progress down the route of drug development, passing those milestone phases as a company, as a pre-revenue company, our model is milestone based, so incremental increase in value as you pass those milestones, phase 1 being 1, phase 2, phase 3, etc. And as we roll that through, roll out along the drug development pathway, we'll be looking at putting in commercialization in place, putting in deals with partners. Maybe we take it ourselves, but it's a little bit early to give detailed specifics on how the sort of longer term plan looks for the sort of 4 or 5 years from now.
Okay. Yeah, if I may add something, I mean, of course, we can sort of separate, if you want, our effort in indication. There are more, they're targeting a sort of not a large set of patients. They're not necessarily rare disease, and some of them may be orphan drug disorder, but some others instead are large. To target a large number of patients, and in this case, probably the company will look to sort of collaborate and go into a co-development when particularly we reach the later phases where the trial are particularly large, for example in IBS.
Okay, I wonder if I can just, Clarissa, just ask you a little bit of a follow on. You talked about that 2027 would is the ideal target to get it to market, but there'll be plenty of milestones along the way as you get there. Do you kind of reach sort of potential crystallization events in those milestones as well in the company's history that you can, have exits, let's for example, things that shareholders can look for?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. So, as a pharmaceutical company, we are following the standard pharmaceutical development pathway, right? So as you go along the drug development pipeline, you hit different milestones, different value inflection points. So, at the moment, we are a preclinical pharmaceutical company. In January, we'll move into the clinic. So there's a mini inflection point right there as we get into the clinic with phase 1. Then when we get our phase 1 results in hand for 461201, program 1, which we believe will be April, correct me if I'm wrong, Valentina, but I think that's right. April 2023, there's another value inflection point there because you've hit phase 1 and you've hopefully, we're pretty confident, but you've hopefully shown safety in that first crucial phase 1. And then you just go down, you continue down the path. You keep meeting those inflection points as you move your drugs through the clinical pathway through to phase 1, 2, 3, and then ultimately to commercialization.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. Well, let's open up now to questions from shareholders or people watching. Just to kick us off, there were some that were sent in just before we went live today, and it's just the first one I have here. What is the cash runway like for the company, and do the reserves take program 1 through clinical trials?
Yes, good news there. We're absolutely funded to get program 1 all the way through its phase 1 clinical trials, which, as we've mentioned a couple of times already, are starting in January. As announced in July, at our period end, we had 9.2 million in cash reserves, so the period ending 30th of April. Obviously, we've spent a bit more of that in the intervening months as we progress our R&D and we continue spending on our programs. We've obviously got program 1 going into the clinic in January, and we've also continued the preclinical development of program 2 so that we have that ready for phase 1. Although, as you know, and I think you and I have talked about separately, back in August, we announced that we were going to pause the clinical phase of that program so that we could extend our cash runway and make sure we've got the cash reserves to get us out to the back end of next year, given markets being what they are at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just perhaps a follow-on from that, what's the resources split in percentage terms between the 4 different programs? So I guess the question is there more of a weighted focus on any one at the moment?
Yes, there is, of course. So, as Valentina was explaining, we do have a pipeline. We've got 4 programs in development, and programs 1 and 2 are by far and away the furthest down the track, with 1 going into the clinic and 2 being ready for the clinic soon as well. Programs 3 and 4 are in that discovery stage, so you would expect us not to be spending as much on those programs. So in terms of the split, if I take the numbers from our annual results, so as at April this year, we were spending approximately 50% of our R&D budget on program 1, as you'd probably expect. About 20% at that point in time was program 2, and then 3 and 4 together were about 30%. That's shifted slightly since April, with more focus on program 1 as we ramp up, finalize that preclinical work so that we can get into the clinic in January. And again, so the spend on program 2 has probably stayed about the same, and program 3 and 4 has naturally dropped down a little bit just in terms of where they're at in the drug discovery process, and as we focus on program 1.
Okay, so the focus there clearly on program 1, and perhaps getting to that inflection point there, getting it through the first clinical trial phase. This is all part of the corporate plan to be successful with all of them eventually.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, if we had unlimited money, we'd carry on, we'd go hell for leather for everything all at once, wouldn't we? But, that's not the sensible way to do this. We want to make sure that we are building value for shareholders incrementally and moving ourselves through those inflection points to bring the value of the company up, before looking for more money and running more programs.
Okay. Yes, and if I may add something there, I mean, obviously we're focusing on program 1. Program 2 is continuing. We are aiming to go into sort of entry another inflection point, if you want, and in Q2 2023 is possible, with by entry in the clinical trial there as well. And in addition, again, program 3 and 4, they will generate their own mean inflection point, but certainly probably more visible from the scientific point of view, moving through the phases of drug discovery. And at this point, as I said, we said at the beginning, we're not just aiming one compound, we're aiming a pipeline. They will not be going in at the same speed, they will not be at the same stage, but we're building up the blocks. So when program 1, we move phase, as Clarissa said, and we're going from phase 1 to the phase 2, so I'm more at the end of phase 2, where we have a large inflection point. We won't have a big gap behind. We will growing up the other program, and that would certainly add value to the company, I would say, certainly scientifically speaking, but also I think from the financial point of view, showing that we actually are able not to be a one-trick pony, but actually to build other program behind the first one.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, let's see how that plan works out. Are you able to give an idea of the size, the sort of the global market size for program 1 at all?
Yes, absolutely. So, as we've said, we're looking initially at CIPN and IBS, and together they're expected to be worth approximately 4.8 billion pounds by 2030. So it's a big market for just those two indications. And of course, as Valentino said, although the focus is on CIPN and IBS, and that's sort of nearly 5 billion figure, we do expect we have got multiple other indications for this molecule. And of course, importantly, once you've gone through phase 1 with the molecule, you don't need to repeat it. So if we're adding additional indications or additional targets for 461201 or program 1, we can go straight to phase 2 with those once we've got through this first phase 1.
Okay, thank you, Clarissa. Well, just another question I have here is actually on program 2, and I think we probably covered it, but with clinical trials delayed on program 2, have workflows also stopped on program 2?
Yes, I guess we have covered it, haven't we? But just to recap, we are still working on the preclinical package for program 2, because although we took the decision to pause it moving into the clinic, into phase 1, so that we could extend that cash runway out to the end of next year, end of 2023, we did want to make sure that we completed the preclinical work so that we had, program 2 was a phase 1 ready asset, rather than, stopping that preclinical work halfway through and not quite finishing the job, so to speak. So yeah, it will be phase 1 ready. There's still some work going on there, and it will be ready at the beginning of next year. I think that's right.
Yeah, and their work, yes, and their work cover both the aspect of safety and toxicology. That is very important. It's crucial to go in phase 1, but also because program 2 is an inhalation device, we are doing the development of the inhalation device per se, or PMDIs. That is very similar to the one that people with asthma will use regularly. Of course, that is a technological challenge that we took on, and we basically successfully went through that one. We have now the final formulation, and therefore the final tweak of the development are going in that direction as well. So again, we will definitely be ready to use that once we go into the next or in preparation of the next phase.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. The other question I have here then, at what point in the Program 1 process would you expect a major or a mid-tier pharma to be taking notice?
Oh, good question. So folks can pop up and be interested at any stage along the way, right? And we are very excited about this program. We think we've got something, that could really be game changing. So anybody can pop up at any point. But I think it's probably fair to say that once we've got those phase 1 results in hand, so come April 2023, I'd expect that's the point in time when we'd generate interest from some of the larger institutional investors, perhaps, and other pharma companies who are looking at, the asset itself, looking at the company overall, thinking about partnering or doing some sort of M&A. So I think it's, it's probably not too far away that people start really beginning to sit up and take notice of certainly Program 1 and OCT.
Okay. Well, let's watch this space. Right, well, let's see. I can see some questions have been coming in. Here's one. Do you have a peer comparison that you aspire to in growth?
Well, there's the old, I think you and I have spoken about this before, Mark, but the one that we tend to refer to, particularly in the cannabinoid sector, of course, is GW Pharma. And I'm sure Val's smiling because he was expecting me to say that. I think we all will be familiar with GW Pharma being acquired by Jazz Pharmaceutical last year for a very healthy $7 billion. So in terms of the trajectory, that's probably the ambition overall. Val, is there anybody else that you would point out?
No, I think at the moment that's the perfect example because it showed two things. So the first one is that the drugs coming from the cannabinoid environment can be developed. And the potential, therefore, is there, and that's important. On the other hand, one may argue that it took a while for them to go into the place. They show that resilience, obviously, in science is always good, but also show that we had to do things in a different way, and that's what we did. So we're aiming to get to that point actually faster. And again, if you compare the size of the patients population in what is treated by basically Epidiolex and what and instead with Sativex and what we can target, obviously in there is an advantage on our corner. So hopefully, as I said, we will follow in that way, making it faster, considerably faster, and therefore sort of reap the benefit of our research a bit earlier.
Okay, so GW Pharma. Okay. Let's see. So next question we have, any developments on identifying a new FD? That's a financial director.
I'd love to be able to answer that, Mark, but I'm pretty sure you know as well as I do that I can't give you any information or any inklings about that at the moment. Safe to say that, as per the announcement of Karen's departure, we're all very sad to see her go. She's been absolutely fantastic colleague and continues to be fantastic and supports us, as we are on the search for her replacement. He's sort of got big shoes to fill, but we will certainly make an announcement on that as soon as we can. Hopefully not too long now.
So it's an ongoing active process. Okay.
Yeah.
The share price is under pressure. What are the plans to try to rebuild the market cap?
Yeah, certainly the board and everybody here at OCT feels very viscerally the pain of the share price and the decline that we've seen over the last months. In particular, this last couple of months, obviously we've got a macroeconomic climate that is not conducive. We're all aware of the state that the markets are currently in, and we're all hopeful that is going to turn a corner. What we are doing is trying to control the things that are within our control, right? So as we've mentioned, we've paused the clinical phase of Program 2 in order to extend our cash runway so that we don't have to go and approach the market for money at the present time, because it's not a great time to be looking. So that we've got some time, some more time on the dance floor, as a shareholder said to me a couple of weeks ago, so that we can, get through those value inflection points, get that data in hand on phase 1 for program 1, and hopefully that will trigger a little value inflection point, a little bump for the company, because we know, we've passed that crucial phase. So really, it's about doing the work, getting our heads down, making sure we're out there talking to investors, talking to our shareholders. And, I guess I can just indulge myself a moment, because this is a useful platform to let people know that, we do want people to talk to us. And if they do ever want to get in touch or, arrange a meeting, we're very happy, the board and myself and the rest of the team, we're very happy to speak to shareholders, because, we want to hear from you guys. It's a difficult market out there, and we're definitely keen to get your feedback. But ultimately, it's focusing on delivering what we said we'd deliver in the time frame we'd deliver it, so we move ourselves through those inflection points, and ultimately, that's value accretive.
Okay. Well, there was a part 2 to that, which was about milestones, but you've answered that for me there. What milestones do you think will achieve that?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'll just pick up on what you said there about more time on the dance floor. Shareholders said that to you. So just on shareholders, and a couple of things. You feel the pain as shareholders do, as private investors, and how if people are sort of talking to you, shareholders, how are they feeling? Are they feeling pain, or are they kind of on board with what you're doing? What feeling are you getting?
It's certainly very difficult to not feel pain with the market where it is and where the share price where it is. And I think it would be wrong of me to sit here and not acknowledge that. I don't want to do that. It's, as somebody who's been at the company almost 4 years, and before we were public, and Valentino has been with us over 2 years, we all work really hard day in, day out to deliver what we promised shareholders we'd deliver when we went out to the market in May of 2021. And we are delivering those things. So it's a frustrating place to be, perhaps sometimes, when you're, coming to work every day and the value isn't necessarily reflected on the screens, the price on the screen. But we are moving down the drug development pathway. We are bringing things through in line with our timeframes, and we're hoping that means once we get through those milestones, we'll be able to properly recognise, and the market will properly recognise the value in OCT. And shareholders, we do speak to a lot, and one of the things that, when we took the decision as a board to extend that cash runway, it was, as a result of various different conversations we had with all sorts of stakeholders. It's super important to engage with the full suite of stakeholders when you're, in this sort of PLC business. And one of the things that people were worried about was, have you got enough, time to get the share price into a more sensible place to raise money when you need to? So extending that time on the dance floor was something people were worried about, and that's one of the reasons that we took the decision we did to pause that clinical phase for program 2 and give us that extra time till the back end of next year, when I'm hopeful, and I'm sure we're all hopeful, that things in the world will have calmed down and the markets will have come back to some more sensible situation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But
and
go on, Valentino.
Yes. So just to add, and I understand that sometimes the investor thinks that we're moving at a slow pace, and that's it's reflected by the share value. But the reality is not like that. If you compare to other type of pharmaceutical company, the larger one, the time going from a significant starting point, in our case, was, for example, the IPO, to actually go into phase 1 clinical trial and then phase 2 clinical trial may take 4 or even 5 years. And we tried to achieve that. If you could take May 2021 as the start of ticking on the clock, we're doing that in less than 2 years, and it is a fast pace. So I think the investor should sort of really start thinking, appreciating, if you want, that we are moving fast. We want to reach that inflection point faster. And when we reach those, the significant one, particularly, for example, the phase 2 clinical trial, and at that point, the value will be extremely high. And there might be companies that are doing this relatively better now, because they have a revenue, they are a revenue generating company, and obviously we're not, but on the long term, if we are successful, that will generate a lot of value.
Okay, well, thank you both very much, Clarissa and Valentino there. So we'll be keeping an eye, looking out, of course, for developments towards the end of the year, and then, a new year start to the phase 1 clinical trials. So thank you both. I hope you can stick around until the end, where we have a bit of a roundtable discussion with other people.
Sure.
And I will now go to our next guest because we are sort of on time for that. So I'd like to welcome Jeremy Skillington, the CEO of Poolbeg Pharma. Good evening, Jeremy. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm very well, very well. Thanks. Good to be on. And very interesting
Yes.
discussion there from the OCT team. Appreciate it.
Oh, good. Yes, I saw you were watching there in the background. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us. So what we're going to be talking about with you is your program POLB001. I do think pharmaceutical companies need to improve their naming of these programs, by the way, but that's just my opinion. But this program is designed to reduce the damage done by an overreactive immune system and improve outcomes for patients with severe influenza. So again, just to start us off, Jeremy, could you just perhaps explain what POLB is all about, why it's different from other treatments on the market for patients with severe influenza?
Yeah, no, happy to do that. Yeah, so POLB001, it's a small molecule immunomodulator. So it hits a target called P38. And what happens when you get influenza virus is that your body reacts to it, recognizes it as being foreign, and the immune system kickstarts and off it goes. Initially, you have an innate immune response that kind of targets the virus, gets rid of it, and then antibodies. But what happens to a certain subset of patients, primarily kind of the elderly, is that their immune system goes askew. I like to say it runs off the end of the runway. They're landing, trying to clear the virus, but it runs off the end of the runway. And what's driving that then becomes a cytokine storm. And we've heard a lot about cytokine storms during the COVID-19 pandemic. And what happens during this cytokine storm is that it causes a lot of tissue damage, vascular damage, even cardiac damage. So it's the immune system fighting back against the virus, but the wrong way. And it does this by activating a target called P38. And we've got a small molecule immunomodulator, blocks the activation of P38. So essentially it blocks that cytokine storm and allows the patient to recover a lot quicker. So as I say, in an influenza setting, a lot of people get it. Every winter, there's 1 billion people get it pretty much every year, and there's 3 to 5 million deaths in total. So it's again, actually 3 to 5 million becomes severe influenza with over 500,000 deaths. So we're kind of targeting that area where it's not antiviral. It's already past that point of no return. So it's when the people become really, really sick that you need to kind of calm down their immune system. And then from that they recover a lot quicker, and that's what our drug will do.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Nice little summary there. Just thinking on the company's cash position, I understand the cash position is almost £19 million from the last results there, and your market cap is just over 22 million, so almost valued at cash value there. Interesting, first of all, that's the case. We'll probably come on to that valuation a bit later. What is the use of these funds? Because that's a significant amount of money. What's the use of these going forward? How long will they last?
Yeah, we're quite fortunate. We raised 25 million last year, and we do, again, to be clear, we have a very what we describe as a capital light model. So the goal and strategy of the company is to get early human clinical data, and then we partner with pharma. And again, quite fortunate in infectious diseases that doesn't necessarily take a long time. These are not cancer oncology trials that take 12, 24 months to get any kind of readout. Infectious diseases are quite quick. So we do run a very tight ship. We're a relatively small team, but very experienced. So we can get the most bang for the buck, as it were. So yes, 18.9 million. This will see us out many, many years. But I think what's key to the Poolbeg business model is the revenue generation through partnering. So we see that the 18.9 as it was at the end of June, that'll be topped up when we do deals, and particularly on POLB001, where we have a clinical trial ongoing right now, the potential to partner that program, generate revenue from upfront payments, and then of course downstream milestones, and then refocus our efforts on the other pipeline products that we have coming through in the Poolbeg pipeline. So it's somewhat of a, we like to say, unique business model, but there's a group in Germany, Evotech, runs something similar, where they do the early heavy lifting, the early de-risking, not spending a terrible amount of money on it, but then partnering with pharma, who then do the heavy lifting in spending the money and bring it through the late stage clinical trials and onto the market. So I think we have a nice say, business model with, and so the cash runway is quite long, but again, we plan to top up through partnering deals as we go through, as development progresses.
Yeah, okay, interesting. That is an interesting business model. Now, the LPS human challenge trial for POLB-001 is currently ongoing. Can you give an update on activities and why the LPS trial data is key?
Sure. I'll give as much as I can. I think the one thing from a Poolbeg standpoint, we IPO'd in July of last year. And one of our stated objectives was to get POLB-001 into the clinic by summer of 2022. So we've hit that goal. We've executed on that particular strategy, that particular milestone. So essentially what LPS does is, again, the body recognizes as foreign. It's actually a bacterial fragment, lipopolysaccharides. It triggers the immune response. The body thinks it's a foreign agent, which it is. And then it, again, activates the inflammatory response, which includes P38. So downstream of this LPS administration, P38 is activated. So now we're challenging these healthy volunteers to see how well our drug does in blocking that P38 response. So so the trial started back in July. We're currently enrolling. Again, I can't talk too much about specific details, but it's currently enrolling and it's on track. We're roughly about halfway through. We did state that we expect to have data on this, initial data by the end of the year, where we'll get a read on not just the safety. A point to make there is that the drug that we're testing, POLB-001, has already been through a full phase 1 study in healthy volunteers a few years back. So we know that it's safe and well tolerated, but we just want to check now the efficacy, its ability to functionally block the P38 pathway and dampen down that inflammatory response, which then has, say, extrapolation over to influenza and severe influenza, where P38 is activated as well. So this is a step in the right direction, getting early human clinical data and potentially partnering thereafter. That's the goal. But we do, as I say, severe influenza is our indication of choice. We have strong intellectual property protection around the use of P38 inhibitors in the severe influenza setting. So that's moving well, and that's where we're good from a partnering standpoint. We'll have data, we'll have intellectual property, and we'll have a pathway for where they can develop.
Okay, so there's plenty of news to come towards the end of the year then on that.
We expect so, yes.
Okay, excellent. Now, you're also running 2 artificial intelligence programs, are you? Can you tell us any more about these?
Yeah. This is kind of a fascinating area of the company. When we demerged from our colleagues at Open Orphan last year, they had a lot of clinical trial data, challenge study data that they ran at their Vivo arm in London. And essentially what this is data from healthy volunteers who get a dose of virus, they get sick and then recover. So we've got a lot of this data that we now are analyzing using AI. This is a tremendous amount of data. It's like 70 people in one trial, 64 people, I think, in another trial. So each individual volunteer has daily data, daily blood samples, looking at proteomics, looking at gene expression profiles, signs and symptoms. And it's a large amount of data for us mere mortals to analyze. So what we've done, we've partnered with 2 artificial intelligence companies, Cytoreason, who are based in Israel, who recently announced a $110 million extension to their collaboration with Pfizer. So these guys play with the big boys, Pfizer and Poolbeg, in the same realm. So they're interrogating our influenza data, and then we've partnered with 13 Biotech in New York, who are interrogating our RSV data, so respiratory syncytial virus, which again is another respiratory virus of significant concern, affecting and causing issues with the elderly and the very young. So they're interrogating this data, looking for new drug targets. What parts of the immune system are activated or upregulated or downregulated, and then identifying drugs. Once you have the target, you can identify drugs and then move forward, bringing those programs into development. I think quite interestingly, and I do applaud the efforts of our colleagues at hVivo, who identified P38 as a driver of severe influenza several years ago without the benefit of artificial intelligence. So it took them many years to come to that conclusion that P38 and ultimately POLB-001 will have a role to play in severe influenza. We're going to do the same in a matter of months. So we're going to have readouts from the RSV analysis by the end of the year, and then from the influenza data, that'll be into next year, into Q2 next year. So again, building out our pipeline of products and programs. We're big into the repositioning, molecules that have already been in humans and demonstrated to be safe and well tolerated, and then repositioning them for the indications of choice, and obviously building some intellectual property around it as well. So we've gained a lot of momentum, the 14 or so months since we IPO'd, incredibly busy, but a very enjoyable, exercise to push along these programs very rapidly, and just excited about the outputs, from the POLB 001 clinical trial at the end of the year, and then the AI analysis of the influenza and RSV data.
Excellent. You almost got potentially another angle then to go to big pharma with the AI data that you'll get.
Absolutely. Pharma, their appetite, particularly in respiratory or infectious diseases broadly, I think they realized, they missed the boat when it came to COVID. They deprioritized infectious diseases for many years. And now they've turned a corner and said, okay, let's not deprioritize that anymore. So they're investing heavily into the infectious disease space. I think there was a mind-blowing statistic that 98% of deals done thus far this year were in infectious diseases. So 96%, I believe. So there's a lot of activity in the space. So yes, I mean, you could potentially just do a target-only deal or a target with a drug deal with pharma to then take forward. So I think we're going to be that conveyor belt, serving up assets to pharma to build out their own infectious disease pipelines. Because as I say, they know these are issues. Maybe they were neglected for so long, but they're not going to neglect it anymore. So I think that we're in a prime position to be their partner of choice as we move our programs forward and generate key data.
Excellent. Sounds very, very interesting. What I'd like to do now then, we're about on time to see what questions we have from investors or potential investors. The first one is very straightforward that I have, Jeremy. Why should I invest in Poolbeg? So the elevator pitch.
Oh, yes. Like we've said from day one, there's no better time to be in infectious diseases. And I think we're quite fortunate that the assets and the data that we've inherited from hVivo is ready to go. I think as a company and on our execution, we've executed on what we stated we've executed. So I think that we've built a really good team around us. So we're going to have, as I say, data coming very quickly. I think, Valentina was saying on the last call that, hitting milestones, hitting timelines are key. We're pushing really quickly. We're, as I say, what we've stated we've done. So I think that's where we're able to execute. So again, great time to be in infectious diseases. Influenza, we've all been distracted by COVID for the last number of years, but I think there's grave concern that the next wave of infectious diseases will be influenza. So there'll be this ambition to stockpile for future pandemics, and that's where Poolbeg comes in. We've got a number of programs. POLB 002 is for respiratory viral infections as well. POLB 003, a bacterial vaccine. These are all stockpilable, if that's a word. And again, from there, we'll generate significant revenue. So again, a fantastic time to be investing in infectious disease companies, and Poolbeg in particular, I have to add.
Okay, excellent. Now then, another question. Do the board of directors have skin in the game? Obviously, that means do you hold shares in the company? If yes, were these awarded or purchased on the open market or indeed in recent placings?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've stated from the start, Cathal Friel, our chairman, and Cathal has invested his own money from the very beginning. I've been, this question has been asked numerous times, but I am willing and able to make an investment. I've been an insider for so much of the activities that we've been done so far, or nomad, on the markets is saying, not just yet, because of insider information that we knew what was coming down the pike. But I'm kind of ready, willing, and able once the opportunity arises to purchase myself. So that's on the open market, and so was Cahill's. That was at the IPO price rather than anything discounted. So that's coming from the key directors. But again, we're very committed. We're as I say, spending a lot of our time on the company, building it forward, and looking forward to continuing with our successes.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. So let me just see. I can see some questions have been coming in. Where do you see yourselves in 5 years' time?
That's a deep question, isn't it? That's a deep question. We have a half an hour. No, I think, as we saw with Poolbeg, we've got 3 assets currently, 001, 2, and 3. What may come out of the AI analysis is a further number of deals. So of targets and drugs. So we're going to be building forward from here. Could we, be the next, as we talk about infectious disease company, will we be a big pharma? Kind of unlikely. Our business model is that we'll do the early de-risking, the early clinical trials, and pass it on. So I think we will grow as a team, but the deal flow will grow a lot further. So that's our strategy for now. That's what we've said at IPO. We're sticking to that strategy right now. We think it will be a successful one. And what you'll see now in the next, as we start doing deals, kind of regularly, I should, point out we hired a new VP of Business Development, David English, recently, to take charge of that. We know there's going to be a lot of interest and a lot of deals coming down the pike. So we're going to start the activities there. So in 5 years' time, we'll be bigger. Maybe we hope to be, as nimble. But again, churning out those very exciting infectious disease programs. Maybe we'll go adjacent to infectious diseases. We'll see. But I think we've got a great opportunity between now and then to grow and create value for our shareholders.
Excellent. Okay. Do you see the OTCQB listing as a significant benefit?
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting one. We're keen to, I say, as a company, we're listed on the London Stock Exchange. We listed in the US as well. It was kind of dipping a toe in the water. We have ambitions to go to the US, and we're kind of actively exploring those, looking for, I guess, opportunities to list on NASDAQ. So as I say, we're not losing sight of our development activities and our development efforts, but that's something we are considering. That hopefully in the not too distant future, there'll be the opportunity to dual list on the full NASDAQ rather than the OTC. But it's been as I say, insightful for us. What it takes, what's expected, etc. So again, the US, there's no shortage of investors. There's no shortage of funds for biotech companies in the US. So we're hoping to get over there, and again, that'll benefit our London-based investors as well. That will drive value for the company, through that activity. So it's been interesting. It's been a learning, but obviously we want to grow from here as well.
Yeah, excellent. I know other companies who have also got that dual listing, and it does actually help to give exposure there across to the US, the US people. What is the estimated end date of POLB 001 trial?
Yeah. So from an enrollment standpoint, we've kind of stated this. We're actively enrolling 36 healthy volunteers. We're roughly about halfway through. We've got 3 different doses that we're giving, so that's on track. So the trial itself now, again, to explain that the enrollment and completion of the studies will be done before the end of the year. The data readouts takes a while to get a little bit of analysis, but we should have an early read, of efficacy by the end of the year. Again, there's a lot of work happens after that, your full data analysis, statistical analysis, etc. So that'll take a little bit longer. But once we have that early readout, that's enough to start having the deeper discussions with pharma around the program and partnering thereafter. And again, there'll be a bit of work after us to wrap it all up. So on track for that, as I say, we're going to, can't wait to see the data. We're optimistic, of course, but obviously data is king, and data will drive the value. So optimistic we'll see positive readouts before the end of the year.
Excellent. For the end of the year. Okay, John, with all the positive updates since IPO, why do you think the share price is off 50%?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think Clarissa addressed some of this on the last call. I think when we look at the general market, I mean, it's been a very difficult year broadly. I will say, and I don't mean to be flippant here, but if the market was up and Poolbeg was down, I'd be very stressed. I think right now we are executing. I think the market is where it's at. I don't think it's a Poolbeg specific issue. But when it turns, they'll start looking once there'll be a bit more buoyancy, once global turbulence calms down. Inflation, if that calms down, that'd be great. But I think when the people turn and they look at, okay, who's been executing in the last 3 to 6 to 9 months, that's where I put my money. They'll look at Poolbeg and they'll see, these guys said that they do something and they actually went and did it. And that's the plan. We're moving along rapidly. We've built a very attractive pipeline. We're continuing to execute, of course. And as I say, we're not taking our eye off the ball. And again, as I say, it's obviously a difficult time for our investors, but other investors, as I say, it's not unique. But we're hoping that once things turn a corner, that we'll be the flying the flag of an attractive investment and drive the share price back up. But all we can do is continue to execute, and that's what we're doing.
Okay. It looks like there's a part 2 to that. Is there a lack of institutional investor appetite? Are you finding that across the board as well?
Yeah, we have some institutional investors. Schroders came in from the start and they haven't left. So they kind of, obviously we hope, believe in the premise as well and believe in the strategy. We hope to attract others. But I think one of our brokers had mentioned recently that there's kind of a risk appetite. They're looking for safe havens. And yes, you might get your modest returns kind of annually, but obviously, they're trying to protect their own kind of slew of investments. But obviously, with something like Poolbeg, where there could be potentially a very large upside, we think that they'll move back in our direction when the time comes. And we continue to get the word out there. We've, as you say, regularly updating the markets, regularly updating our activities. I think we're close to, since IPO, close to maybe 30 RNSs or RNS reaches, getting the word out there, what we're doing. So we're very much focused on keeping the markets updated. And as I say, once the world calms down, we think we'll be a prime candidate to drive shareholder value. I think, as I say, we'll continue to focus and execute.
Okay, excellent. So you have a question. Oh, from Father Ted. Hello there, Father. Will the US patent Poolbeg has applied for to protect the POLB001 as a treatment for cytokine storm, regardless of the underlying condition?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've got two patent families. One is looking at severe influenza. One is hypercytokinemia, which is the cytokine storm. So they're kind of moving through the prosecution. We are thinking beyond severe influenza. As I say, that's our starting point. But Father Ted is right to point out that there's a lot of other syndromes or diseases where cytokine storms are evident. Now, we don't talk about those because as soon as we talk about them, it kind of makes it challenging to protect it from an IP standpoint, because you're declaring in the public domain. So we've got some work in the background, and we're actually kind of filing or drafting patents right now in other areas for POLB001. So we've said as well from the very beginning, what pharma likes are drugs that are safe and efficacious. But if they could put the same drug into multiple diseases, that makes their life a lot easier from a manufacturing standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, from a commercialization standpoint. So, POLB001 has broader potential than just severe influenza, but we want to knock that one out of the park first and then build forward from there.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So, another question here. What would you look for from a partner if POLB001 is successful?
If successful in the LPS trial, obviously it's a development. They would kind of fund. We would license the asset. They would develop that forward into phase 2, phase 3s, and beyond. The standard in the industry, these licensing deals, is that you get an upfront payment, you get downstream milestones on success. Importantly, they will fund development going forward, so we're not kind of dipping into our pockets any further. And again, it's they'll take it forward, and we'll reap the revenue. And we focus then on the other assets. Now there are the possibilities where it might be they'll ask us to continue development, take an option to it, and fund development. So there's many different deal structures we could assign to POLB001. So we're flexible. So we're going to listen to our partners. It could be we've said this as well. It could be potentially territorial deals. A partner may want just the Asian rights, for example, and we'll retain the European and US, or flip that around. So there could be multiple deal types struck for POLB001 on success. So I think we're in good shape here, where again, talking to partners, that they have options as well for bringing this forward, and we can help them whichever way. But again, you're getting that first deal, I think, will genuinely demonstrate the business model to be a success. And I think, again, going back to share prices, that will drive our share price as well quite dramatically. So we're very active, as I say, hiring a new head of business development in that space.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Has Poolbeg mined any quality data from Disease in Motion?
Yeah, I don't think I can comment on Disease in Motion. This is another company that Cathal was talking about. We have the data set we got from HVivo, and again, as I say, that Disease in Motion was outside of my remit. But the data we have from HVivo that we are mining right now, from using the AI analysis, we've had some interim discussions with both Side of Reason and 1-3. We've got early looks at potential. These are quite lengthy analysis. I'm encouraged. I'm excited. I'm a scientist by training, so that's the stuff that gets me excited. But this is very unique. Nobody else has the data set we have, and nobody else has analyzed infectious disease data with using AI. So I think Poolbeg is in a very unique situation. So what comes out of that could be very valuable. And as mentioned, that we could strike deals with pharma just on targets alone if they are attractive. So, Disease in Motion, as I say, outside of my remit and focus. But from the data we have with HVivo, we are mining that, and again, have data coming up by the end of the year for 1-3 and into next year then for Side of Reason.
Okay, excellent. Where do you see your first monetization, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think you got to focus on the lead asset, POB001. The clinical trial, I mentioned the LPS challenge study halfway through. Once that data comes out, then the discussions get deeper. We're planning, JP Morgan in September, in January in San Francisco, where all of pharma shows up and looking for doing deals, kickstart the year on a positive note. So we'll be there, with data in hand to, get those dialogues going. So you'd expect a deal for 001 in 2023. And again, what that looks like, it's hard to predict because pharma are flexible in their deal making, and so are we. So that'll be, I think, the first monetization event for POB001.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So the question was just sent to me on my phone. How many people are in the business, directors and employees?
Yeah, so we've got, that's a good question. With directors and employees, we're looking at about 20. We've got, as I say, a number of colleagues that obviously we go across kind of the research areas, clinical program. We hired a new, clinical director recently, or program director, Sultana Rajbali, which, 15 plus years of industry experience, which is terrific. We go across finance, obviously, administration. The one thing to say about Poolbeg, though, we are capital light, so we keep, the number. We're not going to, bulge out in the number of staff, but we have a range of consultants, experts in their fields that we dip into and out of, as we need. So they're not on salary per se. So they're just on contracts if needed. A good example, I'm here in Barcelona today visiting our GMP manufacturing, and we have a consultant coming in to talk with them. So we're able to kind of dip in and out of a various network of consultants, and that's proved to be to work very well. On the one hand, we know what we don't know, but we know where to find the expertise that we need to fill those gaps.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So another question here from John. You said recently initial results should be out by year's end. Will there be further results forward by the LPS study at a later date than that? And what does the initial results cover?
Yeah, that's a good question. If I understand it correctly, I mean, we'll have the initial results by the end of the year. But then, as I mentioned earlier on, there's that kind of deeper dive of statistical analysis of, full, robust interrogation of the data. As I say, from these volunteers, we're taking, blood and urine and, various samples that we analyze. We've got, as I say, we're both doing an intradermal and intravenous administration of LPS. So we've got a lot of data to analyze. We're actually getting blister exudate. So they develop a blister, you're able to kind of take out and analyze the immune cells. So that takes a little bit of time to go through all of that data. So we designed a trial so that we would get, the more robust data set, we could for this particular trial design. So we'll have the, early readouts of, safety and potentially efficacy by the end of the year, and then the deeper dive of analysis thereafter into next year. But that's as I say, the LPS challenge study is the data set from there. We hope will be partnerable. Where they'll see the value of blocking P38 for inflammatory diseases, and that links in obviously to severe influenza, where we have our patent protection.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think there is one last question here. Not sure if you can answer it, Jeremy, but has there been any interest already from POLB001 from Big Pharma?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to pharma. They know what we're doing. They know what's going on. So, as I say, with pharma, what they like, three things that they like is data, intellectual property, and the market. And I think we have all three of those when it comes to POLB001. Apart from the data, which we'll get very soon. So that's a case of, we'll kind of build it out from there. So yeah, we're, as a, myself, a former scientist, but a former business development professional, we're always talking to pharma. They know what's going on. So, it's just a case of finding them at the right time, at the right data set, and get them excited as much as we are.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy, for your time. I hope you can stick around for another half an hour or so you can join us on the roundtable discussion with our other guests. But thank you very much, Jeremy Skillington, CEO of Poolbeg Pharma. So let's go straight into our next guest, Destiny Pharma, the CEO of Destiny Pharma, Neil Clark. Good evening, Neil. How are you?
Good evening. I'm great. How are you?
Very good. Thank you, Neil. Thank you for joining us today on StockBox Premier. So today we're going to be talking about program NTCDM3, which is an advanced infection prevention clinical program targeting development and commercialization of new anti-infectiveness that improve outcomes for patients and provide cost-effective medical care. So to start us off, maybe you can explain it slightly better than me, but for new perhaps or existing investors, can you give a high-level overview of the program and where it fits into the market?
Yeah, so we're focused on infection prevention. So there is a link with the previous discussion with Poolbeg. But our lead asset, NTCDM3, is targeting a specific gut infection, which is caused by a very nasty bacteria called Clostridioides difficile. It gives infections, specifically in the colon. The bacteria can produce toxins which damage the lining of the colon, lead to inflammation, irritation, serious illness, death. One of the key symptoms is multiple increasing episodes of diarrhea. So a very nasty gut infection caused by this toxic bacteria. And typically, as you know, I refer again back to the pandemic that perhaps has been discussed previously. But what we've all learned, hopefully, unfortunately, in the last 2 or 3 years, is the vital importance of preventing infections, but also the damage that is caused not only by one individual's infection, but also cause cross-contamination and the transmission of infections to multiple parties. And this nasty gut infection can affect people in the community as well as hospitals, but definitely high numbers of elderly patients in care homes and hospitals can get this gut infection. You can imagine if you've got a serious gut infection, perhaps you're elderly and frail, or you're in hospital for a hip replacement, you really don't want that on top of your other perhaps healthcare issues. And it leads in the US, 29,000 deaths annually has been reported, 500,000 cases a year. And it's a serious gut infection. It's poorly treated. But what's interesting about perhaps this condition, C. difficile, is that it fits in with a real increasing interest in this whole area of the human microbiome. And as we listen, present, and talk on this discussion now, each of us has, billions or trillions of bacteria, fungi, viruses on us, in us, hopefully fairly happily in a steady state. We're all reasonably healthy, but you can have specific outbreaks, such as with the toxic strain of C. difficile, and cause nasty infections and indeed death. And there's a whole new area of science of looking at how the human microbiome can perhaps provide better treatments to prevent these conditions and improve maybe the performance of cancer drugs. So it puts Destiny Pharma in that area of the microbiome. But with our specific program, NTCDM3, it's incredibly smart. It's actually a very neat solution. If you can imagine, C. difficile infections are caused by a toxic strain of C. difficile. NTCDM3, as the NT suggests, is a non-toxigenic strain of C. difficile. You take it as a simple pill 7 days in a row in the morning with a glass of water. That bacteria in the pill of the non-toxic strains colonizes your gut, specifically the colon, and effectively drives out the toxic strains. So it stops the toxic strain from surviving in your gut, delivering the toxins. And really in this, what we're looking to do is to stop the recurrence of the initial infection. The initial infection is diagnosed with symptoms of diarrhea, and then you can sample, pretty messy, sample the feces. The microbiologist can say, well, you've got a toxic strain of C. difficile, and what we're looking to do is to deliver a non-toxic strain into the gut to drive out the toxic strain and stop the recurrence of that infection. So it's a very neat approach. It's not a drug in this case. It's actually a bacterial spore as a solid tablet, which colonizes the gut. So it's really quite an interesting but very easy to use, safe, relatively low cost preventative treatment. And again, we're in the area of infection prevention with the rest of our pipeline as well.
Okay, so taken as a tablet then to eliminate the toxic strain in the gut, but presumably not affect the good bacteria that's there as well.
Exactly, and that's a key. And obviously we see this in terms of some of the healthcare drinks, which are not drugs, of course, be it, perhaps shouldn't mention names, but we know the ones in the supermarkets. And there's great logic to having a healthy gut, healthy bacteria. And what we're looking to do here, yes, is to correct this imbalance, but also it's a temporary correction. After several weeks or months, the non-toxic strain we're delivering as our treatment flows out of your gut, and we've shown from the phase 2 studies that you basically return to normal, and you have exactly what we all want, of course, as a healthy gut sort of microbiome.
Indeed. I wonder if you can shed any light on how sort of widespread this problem is, that the market size that you're penetrating.
Yeah, no, well, in terms of the US, again, there's lots of data from America where this is tracked closely. 500,000 incidences of this infection a year, estimated healthcare costs to the US healthcare system of $6 billion for our product. We see a market share, a sensible market share, but also peak sales of $500 million. So this is a large market opportunity. I think it's fair to say Maybe it's not a big pharma opportunity. This is for the next tier of pharmaceutical companies, especially pharma companies, but a very attractive US market, but also as a global opportunity in the UK. C. difficile does occur as well. It's not as prevalent in Europe as it is in the US, but there's still a very large market opportunity in Europe as well. We're specifically targeting the US with our sort of first line for regulatory approval and the biggest market. And indeed, this technology, this science came from one of the world's leading C. difficile academics, medics, Professor Dale Girding in Chicago. So it's got a great pedigree from a world-leading medical sort of laboratory, and great support from the FDA in the US to date. Because remember, this asset has finished phase 2 studies, so it's advanced. It's been in hundreds of patients, been shown to be safe and very effective in phase 2 data. What we want to do, of course, moving forward with a partner, is test it in the last trials, which are phase 3 studies.
Okay. So what about then perhaps the projected savings then, because that's what you're after really, is the preventative side of this. So and there's a lot of burden then perhaps on the healthcare systems. Do you have any sort of data, statistics you can share on projected savings that your treatment would introduce to the medical?
Yes, no, and it's a key component, as you point out, for basically for any drug in development now, is increased assessment of the real cost benefits of new treatments, and that can be collected in the clinical trials, in phase 3 studies, be it the length of patient stays or the use of other drugs to treat a sick patient. Just being in a hospital bed overnight can cost thousands of dollars. So there's clear sort of methods of calculating the cost. And in the US, again, it's been estimated on a per patient basis of an outbreak. If you do have a C. diff infection in a hospital, sort of easily $10,000 to $20,000 per patient cost of that infection. So you can look at sort of the cost of what your treatment obviously can't be $40,000 if it's only going to save 20, you could say. But we have a very good predicted cost of goods for all of our drugs in development, but especially for M3. It's a fermentation here, so it's not organic chemistry. You're effectively fermenting and growing these spores, millions of these spores. But if you get that right, it's a little bit like brewing. You can get a very precise, accurate manufacturing process, gives you a low cost of goods, so you have flexibility on pricing. But the savings, the cost benefits for many of these infections, be it as influenzas was discussed earlier, obviously we've learned the hard way of COVID-19, our programs, be it C. difficile or our other programs stopping staphylococcal infections, there is a clear cost to hospitals and healthcare systems in dealing with patients with infections, stopping cross-contamination, and then, of course, dealing with the patient who actually has an infection, which can cause all sorts of problems. And it's not just an individual infection, it affects your other treatments, be it oncology treatments, etc. If you have an infection, it can stop you having other treatments, and let alone the sort of the quality of life for that person which is damaged. So big costs in the whole of the healthcare systems, preventing infections, treating infections. And as I said, we're in the area of infection prevention, perhaps more akin to vaccines than treatments, because I think, as we've all learned again from the COVID pandemic, stopping infections before they start or very early in their cycle is a no-brainer if it's a clear sort of cost benefit. Prevention is better than cure.
Always, indeed. Well, before we go to the questions, then just a final sort of thought on the current perhaps status or snapshot, if you can give, of the program, the next steps, and ultimately the route to commercialization.
Yes, and our strategy is, again, we're a research and development company, so we're not a sales and marketing company. So again, we're seeking partners. We already have a partner in China Medical Systems, but we're looking, as we've said publicly, we're looking specifically now for a partner for NTCD-M3, and that partner will join us to run the phase 3 studies, which can start, say, in the middle of next year. Ideally, the partner would fund the majority of those studies. So again, that's another clear strategic aim of ours, is to find partners who cover the majority, if not all, of the costs of phase 3 studies. But also that partner then is in the position to plan and actually commercialize the asset, say, particularly in the US, which is our lead market for our 2 lead programs, a US company who can run phase 3 studies with us alongside them, but also then they can obviously lead that commercialization. So for M3, as people know who follow the company, we've been very public. We're looking to close a partnering deal, and we're making progress there. But again, the deal's not done yet. But when it's done, we will announce that, and that will be a key inflection point for us. And also, it will then secure the future of M3 as it moves through phase 3 through to commercialization. And we'll look to do the same then with our other lead asset, XF73, which is for a different infection, but again, it's infection prevention and very, very strong phase 2 data. So we have 2 lead assets with great phase 2 data. We're diversified, but also de-risked. So we were a really exciting, well-positioned biotechnology company.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much. That covers that program very well. So let's go to some of the questions then from shareholders. The first one that I have is, what is the current cash runway within the business, and what percentage of cash and resources are ring-fenced for the program NTCDM3?
Well, it's public that our cash, we've said, runs to the middle of next year, and our priority program is NTCDM3. I couldn't give you the exact percentage, but it's fair to say that the primary focus of the company at the moment is on NTCDM3, followed closely behind by our other lead asset, XF73. But definitely M3 is, if I was to give a percentage, I'd say 60% of the focus of the company at the moment is on NTCDM3.
Now, recent presentations and media have discussed commercial partners for NTCDM3. Can you expand at all on this?
Apart from what we said before, that we're very active, and it's a key corporate goal of the company, the board, the management, to deliver a partnering deal on M3 and also for XF73. But as we've said, all of this year, M3 is further advanced for various reasons. XF73 is catching up. And as soon as we can close a deal, we will announce that deal. But we're aware that it's a key event that we need to deliver. But it's always been number one priority as we entered 2022, and we're making progress. But obviously, until the deal's done, we can't really announce any further details.
Okay. Well, I do have a question here on XF73. Are you able to give any kind of status update on this program?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting actually in terms of just selling forward another event, the company event on October the 18th. We will be giving an R&D day, which will be people can register and listen to our Chief Medical Officer talk in more detail on our programs, but specifically XF73 as well. The update there is that we had, again, great phase 2 data last year. We've spent the time since then finalising the data and preparing the phase 3 study designs. Again, we've made announcements this year. And this is why this program is behind M3, because with M3, we know exactly what we have to do regarding the phase 3 studies. With XF73, we're catching up, and that involves very detailed, extensive discussions with the regulators in America and Europe. We're doing those. In fact, they've largely finished. So we will be announcing more in the next few months. So we will end the year. One of our targets was to end the year with a clear phase 3 program for XF73, and that package then we will then take to partners, continue ongoing discussions. And again, for XF73, we'll look to do exactly what we do with M3, find a partner who will run the phase 3 and also then commercialize, specifically in the US, our key market for both of our lead programs.
Okay. Well, just talking about the US market there, and also just following on, I think, from what we're talking about with Jeremy there about a dual listing, there's a question here. Is the intention still to have a dual listing in North America?
It's definitely something we've looked at. We've been to New York a couple of times in the last 12 months. We're actually going again to a conference in November. Obviously, as has been discussed also, the markets are just as bad in America for life science companies as they are here. In fact, often the UK, European markets merely track the trend in the US. So it's yes, you can have discussions, but there's no openings at the moment for undervalued UK biotechnology companies. But we are doing the groundwork, building the connections, and at the right time, it's definitely something that the board is interested in looking at. But it has to be done the right way. There are many examples of companies who've gone to NASDAQ and it hasn't been as successful as they would have hoped, as there are also some great successes. So it needs to be done carefully and done at the right time. But what I will say is we have 2 great assets, diversification with clear US stories. The US is the main market. And indeed, with NTCDM3, invented in America by Professor Dale Girding, one of the world's leaders in C. difficile infection. So we think we've got some great hooks there for that sort of NASDAQ story. But at the moment, I think it'd be fair to say that companies like us, yes, interested, but just having to be careful at the current markets. That it's not full steam ahead. It's definitely a matter of just being prepared and just testing the waters.
Right. Okay. So very much still on the cards, but as and when time in a timely manner, depending on market conditions. Okay. So what else do we have? I have another question here. Oh, there's one just popped up. You grew the board of directors in 2022. Any further additions?
Not imminently that I'm aware of. It's obviously not necessarily my decision. It's a board decision, obviously our chairman, but definitely we have a strong board, and all the time the board executive, we're open to strengthen as we develop the company. But I think we've made good progress building the company. When we IPO'd back in 2017, we were 5 people, and now we're around, I think if you include the board, about 25 people. So we've shown we can grow. And again, as with Poolbeg, we operate a virtual model. It's not necessarily about having lots of people. It's being able to access the right experts at the right time to work in that lean, mean sort of virtual model, which is fairly common across the industry now.
Okay. Well, 5 to 25, yeah, that's a pretty significant increase, really. That's a decent team that you've got behind you.
Yes.
Where is Destiny's biggest opportunity in the pipeline?
Well, I think at the moment our most advanced program, M3, is our leading opportunity. But XO73 nasal is of a similar size, a great opportunity, and is catching up. Wouldn't like to choose between them. Obviously, the earlier programs, we have a dermal infection program, we have a government-funded COVID-19 program. They're moving along nicely as well. But of course, with the 2 lead assets, we have human data. We have data from hundreds of patients showing they're safe and effective. So of course, the value is more clearly exemplified and de-risked, but we still have to do phase 3. So they're both great assets, justifying on their own values of hundreds of millions. We would say, obviously, the markets don't deliver that at the moment. That's up to us to keep persevering and deliver the partnerships and the phase 3 data that confirm that. But they're great opportunities, and they're both of significant value. M3, because it's more further advanced, I'd say is our most valuable asset at the moment.
Excellent. I have another one here. Can you say what the salaries are of the board compared to your peers? And again, management skin in the game, shareholdings.
Yes, no, I've invested. We've done 3 funding rounds, the IPO, and then 2 placings. I've invested in the 2 placings, as have other directors, and our founder, owner, Dr. Bill Love, still has a significant stake. So the management have invested in terms of cash, our own cash, in terms of shares. Also, we benefit from share options, which is fairly normal. Sorry, what was the other question regarding salaries? Well, the salaries are public. I'm not going to comment on my own salary here, but you can read about it if you want to on our website in the annual report. Actually, I can say we've had a recent benchmarking survey done, and we're in line with a relevant peer group. So obviously we're well rewarded, as it were, but not excessively, and it's up for us to deliver. If we don't deliver, then I'm sure there'll be repercussions.
There will be. You mentioned, hang on, there's a question. COVID, yeah, well, I have a question on COVID-19 as well. But this one here, how did COVID-19 affect the company? Do you think it will be cause ongoing issues?
It's a good question, actually. It's interesting. I mean, without being too, I'm not sure I should say this, but we had a good COVID because very quickly with our collaborator Sporegen, we identified a very interesting COVID-19 specific project, and we were awarded an £800,000 government grant. So specifically, and that's finishing currently, but that's we haven't reported too much on that, but that's gone well. So that was right in our sweet spot in a way. We're focused on infection prevention, and we very quickly established a partnership and a program looking at a new way of a nasal spray to help protect against COVID-19 and also influenza. But also, I think broadly, though it's not reflected in the share price, as perhaps I've said several times, so I don't want to repeat myself, but if we don't understand the benefits now of infection prevention, again, if they're safe, cost-effective treatments, then when are we ever going to understand? I mean, the horrendous healthcare and financial cost of the COVID-19 pandemic, if people can't understand the benefits now of preventing and indeed treating infectious diseases, then we've got a problem. But it really is a big problem. And the other thing on top of COVID-19, let's not forget the other major global concern, which some would argue is a bigger threat than COVID-19 or influenza, is antimicrobial resistance and the growth of superbugs, which again was highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic. Many patients getting a COVID-19, a viral infection, but at the same time, the bacteria, incredibly opportunistic, jumping into the respiratory system, and you have a bacterial infection. How do you treat a bacterial infection? Antibiotics, but there's been a shortage of investment by big pharma in antibiotics. So there's a lack of treatments. And of course, if you reuse old treatments, you get this antimicrobial resistance, in many cases superbugs, which are impossible to treat. So the backdrop here of COVID-19 infection prevention, we think, has highlighted the great work that Destiny and other companies like us are doing in this space. It's fair to say it has been neglected by pharma in the past, but it's highlighted the importance of preventing infections. It's vital. Going back to penicillin in the late 1930s, 40s, a revolutionary. Stopping an infection could save your life. These are not treatments or which can actually sort of make you sort of perhaps just have a better way of life for a few months or a year. These can actually stop life-threatening infections, and you can be totally cured. So they're fantastic. They're good treatments for infectious diseases, and we should support them more in various ways, be it government regulation, and obviously what we're looking for, of course, as a public company is to attract more investors as well.
Well, I do remember your nasal spray for COVID-19. It was talked about quite a lot, of course, during the pandemic there, and a lot of investors coming into the space then. Is it still valid today, the COVID-19 that you're working on?
We think it is. I think that there's and that's demonstrated through other activities in the space. There's some big, especially in the US, some big US government programs. Again, they're all governments. I think fair to say probably caught short in certain cases. They've had to look again at their pandemic preparedness and what would be an ideal option to have in your locker, as it were, a very stable, easy to use nasal spray that's not specific to particular strains, that could be used instead of or alongside vaccines. Cheap to make, stable, can be used in sort of third world countries as well, low middle income countries. This is the profile of Sporkov, and there is still interest in these products, and also, of course, influenza, which is similar to coronavirus as well, which our program is looking at working to prevent influenza as well. So yes, there is still interest, but it is obviously fair to say that there's less profile, but it's still out there. I mean, we obviously have a Chinese investor, and there's still serious consequences, lockdowns in China because of the ongoing threat of the pandemic. And as winter approaches, hopefully we don't have outbreaks, but COVID is still out there. I know relatives who've had COVID recently, luckily not particularly serious illness, but they're having to lock themselves away quietly for 5-6 days until they're screened correctly, and it's a problem. I read today certain hospitals now are reintroducing masks, so it's not gone away. Hopefully, it's much reduced from the impact it had before. I'm sure none of us want that, but definitely still a healthcare concern.
No, definitely for sure, and I think this winter will be interesting to see what happens there. I think I read that the Germans were going to be asked to wear masks this winter as well, so it's definitely not gone away for sure. I wonder, we've got just a couple of minutes, and I'll probably go to the discussion maybe just a minute earlier, but just a final thought. You mentioned there about attracting investors. Can I ask you, well, to make the pitch for that, how are you going to do that?
Well, I think it's an element of delivering, as we said, one of our big targets this year is a partnering deal, so we're aware of that. We know some existing investors are specifically waiting for that, and potentially some new investors, so we have to deliver that. But at the same time, these are very tough markets, and as has been said earlier, management teams, we can't always run companies focused on share prices. We have to deliver strategies, and that's what we're looking to do. And I've been doing this in the listed environment since on and off since, crikey, was it 1999? So there's been various cycles. This is obviously a tough one, but it will come back, and companies like us need to be ready. And one way to be ready is to keep delivering your strategy, sort of stick to the knitting, but at the same time be creative, and investors will respect that. But at the same time, there are specific problems in London AIM regarding life science companies. This is why people increasingly are looking to NASDAQ and looking to try and get into that sort of much larger, more sophisticated life science market of the US, be it East Coast or West Coast. And there's some great examples of that where companies have done well, but you also need to be realistic. You're also competing, remember, with hundreds of American companies that are also pretty good in some cases. So it's it requires a proper program to get traction in the US. It'd be great to have more support from specialists in the UK. And we'll all keep working on that. But I think from the company's point of view, if we deliver success, then investors will pick up on that. So I know everyone on this call and elsewhere is working hard to deliver that data, and the investors hopefully will come back and will have increased support.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Neil, for your time. So what I'd like to do now is go straight to the round table, so everyone can come back to the studio here. I See everyone there. Welcome back, everyone. So what we'll do now is I've got 2 or 3 discussion points that I will put to you, a bit like question time on BBC One. And then we'll go around and get people's opinion, and please feel free to debate each other. No arguments, though, if we can avoid it. So the first one, and actually it follows on quite nicely, Neil, from what you were saying there about sort of the US and the government there, and trying to get some perhaps more support potentially for in the UK. And of course, a lot of government focus was put into the pharmaceutical industry during COVID. So how are you finding that the UK government specifically, how are you finding them working together with the pharmaceutical sector to perhaps try and simplify regulatory or political issues facing industry to encourage innovation? So I will go to Jeremy first on that one.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the UK, they've said a lot. The UK government is, they're big upping the life science community. They appreciate the value. AstraZeneca, kind of a lot of companies based here have done really, really well. I mean, we're not in a position to actually kind of engage with the UK regulators just yet, but I think they say all the right things. Whether they'll execute is that next step as well. But again, I do like the sounds coming out of them about encouraging. They do appreciate the value of life sciences, the value that life science companies contributed, to the pandemic. I mean, globally, developing a vaccine against a new virus in 9 months is just remarkable. Nobody expected that. So I think they appreciate. I hope they appreciate the value that companies like ours speaking tonight can bring and give us the supports we need. As you said, I'm not against kind of regulation. I think it's necessary. Anything that goes into humans needs to be cross-checked and checked again. But I think just kind of supportive, maybe startup support, kind of emerging company support, that'd be very much appreciated.
Okay, so saying all the right things, but perhaps you want to see a bit more action.
Is that what they do?
Yeah, for the most part. Clarissa, would you like to see some more action? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to quote Elvis, but a little less conversation. I think that's right. At OCT, we're definitely all about regulation. My background is legal, as many of you may know or may not know. And so, we're dealing with cannabinoids. We've got to be absolutely on the right side of the line there. And of course we are, licensed by the Home Office and so on. But, we would advocate, regulation as the friend of the patients, the friend of physicians. It helps us demonstrate to people that, drugs are safe and that they're efficacious and that we can actually prescribe them with confidence and people can get the benefit of them. But yeah, there are moments for sure when you feel like there's quite a lot of hurdles to clear, and perhaps a little bit more cooperation might not go amiss.
Particularly with OCT as well, of course, and we're dealing with cannabis as well, which the whole prohibition. Valentino, do you want to? I can't hear you, Valentino.
Sorry, I didn't mute it to avoid noise on the background. But it's incredible how actually it's a small molecule, and that they have to go through all the regulation as if there were THC or other controlled substances that create actually barrier in terms of doing research. We found, for example, some experiments that we wanted to perform in some countries in the world. I'm not going to mention, and basically we were effectively discouraged by the fact that sending material there would created massive repercussion in terms of timelines and cost as well. So I think here in the UK, to the perspective, they are a bit more open than others, as we experience. From the regulatory point of view, I have to say the MHRA is trying. Whether it's coming is because of Brexit or because that was already on the pipeline. But there are some schemes that may be access. One is the Early Access to Medicine Scheme, EAMS. That is generally targeting or designed for seriously debilitating condition. The other one is the ILAP. That is the innovative licensing access pathway. It's kind of a passport, if you want, to accelerated development. And it is accessible, and whether that is actually going to generate a momentum and sort of real results, should we say, material advantages, you could call it, then it has to be said. But it's certainly something that we, for example, in our case, we are trying to access, and hopefully that will give us some advantages as well.
Okay, good. It's nice to hear you're seeing perhaps some encouraging signs. And you mentioned Brexit there, and I think the UK.
I didn't want to get political. I suppose there are differences, if not practical, because it's kind of all the regulation are very similar, to be honest. But sometimes some sort of more as a type of approach. You can, for example, in terms of orphan drug designation and when do you have to go for that one? And I think in some cases the government should do a bit more because they kind of backed off a bit from the intention of the idea. Originally was supposed to support people to get into it, and even through the preclinical now it's mostly phase 1 and phase 2 actually. But still, I guess they are trying to get together and simplify the system in terms of, for example, from the bureaucratic loads, there is a combined MHRA and ethical approval, so regulatory and ethical approval. So I think that is certainly something that's made things quite easy for everyone.
Okay. Well, I hope the UK can make the most of Brexit. Whatever side you're on, it's an opportunity.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, Neil, what do you think? What do you think?
No, I agree with the rest of the panel. Not sure I've got anything new to add to that. I will but note Kate Bingham was very critical recently of some changes to the way I think the patient database was used during COVID, so that there was very rapid testing of patients. And I think that's almost being disbanded, isn't it? I think she sees that as a lost opportunity for us, if we want to volunteer to participate in a variety of clinical studies. Because having worked at a CRO before, Ergomed, who carry out clinical studies, the UK is perversely, even though there's great life science and lots of hospitals, lots of unfortunately sick people, not necessarily a great place to run clinical studies for various reasons. And maybe that's a lost opportunity, but yes, there are. We see with our programs, the US has been very supportive. We've had several grants from the US government supporting our lead programs. Not had, apart from some very small UK grants, I guess the COVID grant, not had huge support in the UK. So the US definitely, there's some very big opportunities for in terms of recently a company awarded up to 300 million for a drug development program, phase 2, phase 3. So the US really there's much bigger numbers than the UK. You don't see too much of that support. Obviously, COVID was a very specific event, but I think it'd be interesting to see how it develops with obviously trying to build up the life sciences in the UK, which is one of our great industries. So we're all biased here, but we should be investing more and support the companies to link in with the NHS and other ways to get drugs approved here.
It's nice that here we have two companies actually working in that direction and sort of addressing the potential risk of viruses and infection. And I started actually as a virologist, and my first words when I was defending my thesis was that there was not enough investment in antiviral drugs, and if you exclude HIV. We're still around with ganciclovir, basically. It was known 30 years ago. Or amantadine. But the government has invested a lot in COVID. There was, to a certain, obviously, was justified. Although I did see a lot of sort of I'm not saying wasted money, but certainly a lot of investment in research that wasn't necessarily going into the right direction. This is not talking about these two companies. Fortunately, they used the right approach of drug discovery and application of all the parameters. In some cases, was almost like a wishful thinking, and there was investment in that direction. And I hope what we'll learn from this one is that COVID was one. Infectious disease, but it's not the only one. And there's always been something around the corner, whether it's a new strain of flu virus, that is a mix between a bird and a human, virus that will be extremely effective and unfortunately highly contagious, or virulent and highly contagious. There is need to invest in antiviral and anti-infectious disease. And again, it was mentioned in this panel as well. Multi-resistant strain, right? I mean, there's no antibiotic that is kept aside for that. There's no a real treatment. Hopefully, through these companies as well, and through the government investment, there will be more option than antibiotics to treat this type. Because if there is an outbreak in some hospital, that could have really potential disastrous outcomes.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So sort of slightly mixed opinion there, Neil. You're seeing a bit more from support from the United States. The rest of the guys want to see a bit more action from the UK government, but maybe that will come. I mean, the mini budget that was out the other day, making the most of the financial sector. So maybe we will see some, encouraging innovation and making the most of London. Let's see what happens. We hear a lot of promises, don't we? But anyway. Moving on to the next point then. This is about biotech. So we hear a lot about biotech these days. Do you think this industry poses a threat to the pharmaceutical sector? And Neil, let me go to you first.
No, I think, well, I'll go. I think they're complementary. I think perhaps pharma, I wouldn't claim to be an expert on global pharma strategies, but perhaps a trend where they're doing less of their own in-house discovery development, but looking to bring in technologies at the right time when or assets when they're de-risked or there's proven data, and then they take it forward into their big machine. So I see it as complementary, and hopefully as perhaps one of the things perhaps we need in the UK is more companies making that transition from loss-making biotech to sort of specialty pharma, which is where you hold on to a product all the way through, and perhaps you then launch it yourselves. But I see it as being complementary, and as the guys know, there's a great sort of ecosystem of networking, be it business development or science, and circling each other. And biotech's obviously always wanting to try and do those deals with pharma, but pharma also need to feed the machine. They have failures. I mean, perhaps we focus sometimes on biotechs, and we're often exposed to one or two programs. But if you read the trade press, every day there's a pharma company has a problem with an asset, which is the way of biology. But also that means they need to keep feeding the machine. So that's why they do these in-licensing deals or buy companies. So I think there's always work to be done, but it's a really interesting environment to work in. So I think they fit alongside each other, but it's constantly developing.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeremy, go on. I can see.
Yeah, if I could add great points, Neil. I think the lines are blurred. It's very hard to distinguish at times biotech and a pharma. Yes, you've got kind of historical pharma with private family, the Rosches of the world, etc. Who are public as well. But I think you look at Pfizer, who did a terrific job becoming a biotech company with BioNTech. They're kind of like taking technology, they see something that they're missing, and they're more than happy to bring it in. They're moving more now into cell therapies, which at one stage is just pharma. I think again, from a small company perspective, you can biotech does the early de-risking, the proof of concepts. Maybe they're more risk averse, but they certainly have the deeper pockets. And if you can convince them that this is a direction to take, that this is innovation, they need to be at the cutting edge. They need to be adding 10% to their 50 billion in sales. They have to, they can't rely on the old world. Let's say they have to kind of move forward. And they might be slow to turn that ship, but I think once they get on board, they're quite quick. So, we are, we're kind of feeding them their pipeline, as Neil said. I think they realize that there's other programs out there. Their bandwidth is always an issue. They realize that they've got a finite number of scientists, they can't work on everything. So if somebody comes up with a clever approach that they were unable to do, they're happy to do deals. And that's the business development network. They're out there looking. It might take some time or some challenging conversations to convince senior management to move in a certain direction. But once they do, then they're all in. And again, for smaller companies, they've got the deep pockets to fund the phase 2s, phase 3s, and commercialization, which is what they're really good at. So it's a little bit of blurred lines, but I think it's a good, as you said, it's a good ecosystem. They need us and we need them.
Okay.
I personally experienced both positive and negatives. I've seen big pharma where I was working for investing in biotech; they didn't go anywhere. And I worked for a biotech that was actually sponsored, supported initially actually by a large pharma, and then acquired when it was successful. So you can say that if once the entrepreneurial aspects or capabilities of the individual within the large pharma are not sort of quenched by the infrastructures and the large numbers of management that is hanging around in the large pharma, they can, if they have the freedom to do that, they will be invested and they will find a good opportunity. For our perspective, I guess it's sometimes difficult to accept the fact that they will spend millions in organizing a meeting somewhere nice in the US or in Europe, bringing in thousands of people, and then they don't have they don't invest enough in earlier concepts where the biotech is not just a product but also a platform or a series of assets. So that would be nice to say. It's sort of a more proactive and risk approach, because it's the high risk is also I benefit, and I could certainly benefit more from that.
Mm.
Okay, Carissa, do you have any?
I think I had nothing really more to add. I tend to agree with the rest of the folks on the call. Actually, complementary. Sometimes a little bit. We sort of bump up against each other a little bit, but I think we both need each other, right?
You both need each other.
And those lines do get blurred. I agree with Jeremy there.
Okay. Right, well, I think this will be my last discussion point, and I quite like this one. But we have kind of touched on this briefly in some of the sort of questions earlier on. But thinking over the last 2 years, of course, the pandemic and COVID brought a lot of new investors into investing, but certainly into the pharma space, and certainly shone a big spotlight on that sector specifically, with some companies, of course, doing very well. Others not, or slipping back since then, and of course investors have been caught on both sides of that. The question: do you feel the sector has had its time in the sun? Valentino.
Well, it sometimes feels like that. I think what unfortunately our sector is feeling really the brunt of is obviously the financial turmoil. And there were a few questions, and I saw them, maybe some comments that you're, addressed to more than one of our companies, saying, your share value is dropping. Well, if you compare to the other companies as well, not in this sector, they're not doing any better and they're not doing any worse. It's unfortunately is the situation where the risk of investing now is high in any environment. So I don't think that will be the end of it. I think once the situation is clear, and when the government get their head together, I don't want to get too political, but when certain words are they're benefiting some and not benefiting others are going to be fixed for real, not just in words, then I think the market will be revitalized, and the investor will start going back. One of the things that was interesting, and we talk about a lot of assets and everything, but I think I kind of perceived from the other panelists as well is the quality of the team that they have surrounded themselves with, and I think that is crucial to attract investors. And some investors are more attracted by a really solid project than maybe the asset per se. And so when things will change, I think we will see the sun coming back.
The sun coming back. Okay, so it's not fully set, or not set indefinitely. Maybe we will see, given market conditions, maybe this will sort out some of the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, tough markets, and obviously there were perhaps some COVID tourists. I've heard them described as investors, but they've also, there's some of the bigger pharma companies had some great performances, perhaps vaccine led. So hopefully some of those investors will come back and see the value in the sector. There's no doubt, as I think you outlined, we're all, there's more people in the world, despite what people say. There's increased improvements in healthcare systems across the world, which means more operations, more hospital stays. Also means people wanting better treatments for whether it's infections or neuroscience. So it's an ongoing drive. We all want to live forever, but as you get older, you begin to fall apart. There's always going to be a need for drugs, treatments, rubber gloves, hospital beds. The demographic goes on. So there's always going to be opportunities. Perhaps at the moment we're going through a cycle with very tough markets of a mild correction. But the fact is, quality science and biology and treatment, it's a no-brainer. It's always going to be a strong sector in sort of across the world. We see it in developing markets, China, great activity. And yes, it's biology, remember. Not everything works. So there's always going to be some uncertainty, just like in gas and mining, which I personally never understand in London, how people can get so excited and continue to invest in risky mining projects, etc. Whereas, many biotechs, very similar risk profiles, but, in some cases much better, from what I understand, better sort of company positioning and rationale. Yeah, it's harder for us to find those specialist investors, but we keep persevering. More successes that companies deliver, investors will come back to it, because there's some fantastic opportunities to sell products to make money, which at the end of the day drives share prices, news flow. But then ultimately, it's, are the products we're developing, are they used? Are they widgets? Are they shifting off the shelves? That's what we all want to do. We want to make patients' lives better. And as you deliver that, there's some fantastic commercial returns, which will feed back into valuations. And we have to keep persevering. And this is just a little bit of a trough at the moment, largely driven by global factors. We'll come out of it.
Yeah, indeed. I always think it's interesting, this sort of comparison between pharma and mining, because we talk to a lot of mining companies, and that sector is extremely cyclical, and it's been in the bear market for a while. And I wouldn't have thought that pharma would see a cyclical cycle like that. As you say, it's treatments are always needed. You always need to develop.
I think maybe more biotech than pharma. Pharma, remember, has the resilience of trading revenues, existing products, some of them quite dull old products, but they just turn over. So you have profits, and you have a more relatively stable, valuation as a multiple of your profit. When you're loss making, biotech research is driven very much by sort of news flow, the next event, and perhaps more sentiment driven, not really defensive stocks. So this is the just like with mining, this is a sort of the little bit of the roller coaster we have to ride, which can be very exciting. And there's downs, but there's also plenty of ups as well. So we've all been through that, and we'll look forward to that again, I'm sure.
Indeed. Jeremy, of course, Poolbeg came to the fore very much during the last couple of years, didn't it? Will the sun rise again?
It did. I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier, we spun out of Open Orphan, and they were. And again, I applaud Cathal. He acquired hVivo. I think it was December of 2019. A viral, challenge study clinical trials company just before the pandemic took off. So a lot of focus on those. So they've done well. They ran the kind of one and only, as we know, the COVID challenge study, at hVivo. Again, kind of grasping the nettle, as it were. I mean, when the data is all kind of finalized, thankfully Poolbeg will have access to that through our license agreement. But I think, the points were made earlier on. I mean, I think we're all innovators here. We're all pushing forward. What goes on around us, choppy waters I've used, absolutely without question. These are disturbing markets, but, we're we see the lighthouse. We just keep going. And I think that, once we kind of, keep pushing, keep doing what we're doing, generate that data, follow the science, follow the biology, I think, and I said this earlier on in my talk, that, when once the water is calm, you look around and then they realize, oh, there's a company that going to sail right through. They've been doing really well. They've stuck to their mantra. They've stuck to their goals and ambitions. Excellent management team, great data. That's the people we go after. So cyclical, I think, is the word. And looking forward when it turns that corner.
Excellent. Well, certainly the COVID pandemic would have shone a light on the sector anyway, and hopefully introduced a lot of new investors. Clarissa, have I given you an opinion on this or not? I can't remember.
No, not yet, Mark. But I would echo what Jeremy was saying. I think, look, yes, the sun's going to shine again, hopefully soon, but maybe not immediately, but hopefully soon. And I think Jeremy's absolutely right. When things do turn, and they'll turn quickly, and investors will be looking around to see who did what they said they were going to do, who's delivered on their promises, who's got data in hand, and what are they doing with it. And that's the point. I think everybody on this call, we're all in the same, we're all pushing in the same direction. We are innovating, we're trying to solve big problems for people and patients and families of patients, and ultimately make an impact on people's lives. And that's the thing that's going to drive this, and going to continue to drive this sector, regardless of the choppy waters, that we all have to navigate every now and again. It's all about making that impact.
Yeah, we're a resilient bunch.
Thank goodness.
Excellent. Okay. Well, on that note, I think we can finish. Thank you all very much for that discussion there at the end. So, yes, thank you to all our guests tonight, Clarissa Show-Mimo-Coker and Dr. Valentino Paravicini from Oxford Cannabinoid Technologies. Thank you both for joining us. Jeremy Skillington, the CEO of Poolbeg Pharma, thank you for your time tonight.
Pleasure.
And Neil Clark, the CEO of Destiny Pharma, thank you very much. And of course, thank you everyone at home for watching StockBox Premiere, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.